everyone, so to kick things off today, as usual, I'm priming the eye area with the Urban Decay Eyeshadow Primer Potion. I've already added a few swipes of this to the eye area with the applicator, and now I'm using a synthetic brush just to buff that in. And the primer is going to help the shadows to apply nice and smoothly and to last all day long. Today I'm using the Sigma Warm Neutrals palette, volume 2, and I don't think I've ever tried anything from Sigma other than their brushes. And their brushes were all the rage when I started my channel like 9 years ago, and I'm still using some of those same brushes today. The quality is brilliant, so I have high hopes for the palette. So the first shade that I've taken is called Toasty, which, as you guessed, is a lovely warm medium toned brown, which is going to work perfectly as a transition shade. So I'm taking a large fluffy brush. This is the Coastal Scents BR250 brush, and I'm placing my brush in the crease, starting by working along that area. Now, because the brush is quite fluffy, you will have seen that I'd gotten like a little bit of shadow down on the lid, but that's fine. I'll be adding it there anyway because we're going for a spotlight look today. So a halo eye, as some people call it as well. Now I'm using a smudger style brush. This is a free double-ended brush that came with the Riviera palette, and I'm using that, just a smaller side, to sweep some of the toasty shade down along there, and then flipping it over and using the fluffy side to blend it out. Then I'm going back in with the fluffy brush from Crown Brush, or Coastal Scents even, Coastal Scents. I'm going back in with that once again, and I'm building up the intensity of that shadow, and this time as well I'm sweeping the shadow down on the inner third of the lid, and again more on the outer third of the lid to bump up the colour, and I'm just leaving a space bare in the centre of the lid, which I'll fill in later on. Next then I'm taking the shade Henna, which is a deeper warm brown shade, and I'm switching to a smaller blending brush. This is the Sigma E25, I'm pretty sure. The numbers have gone from the handle because I've had them so long, as I've said. I'm almost certain that's what it is anyway. So I'm using this now to add depth to look. I've started by tapping it down on the very outer edge, and then I'm sweeping it across into the crease using circular motions to buff and blend it out. I'm moving back then to that smaller smudger brush from the ABH palette, picking up some more of that eyeshadow henna, and then I'm smoking it down along the lash line, making sure that it connects up on the outer edge. And this time I'm not smoking it out with the fluffy side of the brush because I don't want to blend it down as far as that toasty shadow. Next then I'm taking Rogue, which is a gorgeous vibrant red. Now I wanted to mute it slightly for today's look, which is why I've used two browns first. Layering the shadow over the dark brown especially is going to tone down the red. You can still get that nice red effect, but just a more subtle version, if you could call red eyeshadow subtle, that is. So I'm just using a Blank Canvas Cosmetics E26 blending brush to apply the shadow in the way, same way as I've done before, into the crease, down onto the outer third of the eye, onto the inner third of the eye as well, just leaving a little gap in the centre of the lid. And you don't have to be perfect with this because we will be cleaning up the centre part with concealer now in a moment. So I'm just going back in now with that Coastal Scents brush with no additional product on it, and I'm using the fluffiness of the bristles now just around the edges of the eye makeup look so far to make sure that they are nice and soft and blended. Then I'm using the smudger brush once again to apply that Rogue shade down along the lower lash line, and this brush is obviously more dense than a blending brush, and you can see now just how red that shadow actually is. It's gorgeous. I'm taking a full coverage concealer. This is the L'Oreal Infallible Concealer in the shade 327 Cashmere, one of my all-time favourite concealers, and I'm just using a small C-shaped synthetic brush that's from the Vanity Planet vegan brush set that I have. Now I'm starting at the lash line in the centre of the lid and very carefully patting and pressing the concealer down, raising my brush a little higher each time towards the crease as I go. Then I'm using the shape of the brush to my advantage, and I'm tapping across the crease, letting the shape of the brush do all the work for me by carving out the crease line. Now as you can see, it's not perfect in the crease. It's a little bit fluffy on the edges. That doesn't really matter though, because later on I can go back in with a small precise brush and some shadow and correct that. Plus you only need a small centre part cut out for this look, so I wouldn't really get too bogged down on it. Now I'm just using the excess product, just getting that off the brush, tapping down the concealer, and then just moving my brush across the lid. Now I'm switching back to my fluffy blending brush with a little more of the red shadow on it, and I'm very lightly buffing over the inner part of the eyelid, right over the edge of that concealer to blend it in. And I'm doing the same now with the outer third of the eye, just very lightly buffing the eyeshadow towards the concealer to blend the two in together. Then I'm taking this red shimmery brown shade called Iconic on a flat C-shaped brush, and I'm patting this right next to the red shadow on the inner and outer portion of the eye. This shadow is pretty much going on top of the concealer, so I've got a nice tacky base for it to stick to and to make those shimmery particles pop. And don't worry at this point about being neat. I'm not at all concerned with it at the moment. It's the shape that I am concerned with, so laying down the shadows and then I can intensify the colour in a few minutes if I need to. Then I'm going in with that shadow Bittersweet, which is more of a golden bronze shimmery shade, and I'm using a little C-shaped brush. This one is the Sigma E20 short shader, and that's the shadow that I'm applying this time, or kind of overlapping it with the previous shade. It just helps them to blend together that bit better. Once I'm happy enough, then I'm taking the shade Charmer for the centre piece, and I'm applying it with a Royal & Langnickel pencil brush, and I'm just wriggling it and patting it on the centre of the eyelid. So now that I have all the colours pretty much down on the lid, I'm going to intensify them. So I'm reapplying that shade Charmer now, and I just wanted to use as many shades in this palette as possible. So I went in with a little of the shade Beaming next, and I decided to apply that over the centre of the lid as well, just to really make the shadow pop. As you can see now, I'm just going back in with each of the previous lid shades. I'm reapplying them to the lid. I'm also overlapping one over the other, just to make sure that each shade fades into the next. Then what I'm doing is I'm going in with the L'Oreal black eyeliner. This is a retractable one that they have, just to line my waterline, and my eyes are really sensitive. I hate lining the waterline because my eyes water. So to avoid that, I blink as I'm applying. It doesn't help though that I always poke myself in the eye. Mascara, liner, lashes, something always ends up prodding my eye. So I decided then that I actually wanted to incorporate some more of that red. So I'm reapplying it now with the smudger end of the ABH brush, and I realised then that I actually had applied it kind of too far into the eye socket, but it doesn't really matter. I flipped the brush around and I just gave it a good blend. Then I went into the crease with the smudger side. Once I was happy with that, I flipped the brush back around and just blended everything back out again. To add some depth then, I'm taking the shade Corrupt from Makeup Geek, and I'm using this very, very lightly around the edges of the look, so inner and outer corners, and then I'm very carefully sweeping it into the crease. To get right in at that crease line though, however, and to define that, I'm switching to an angled brush. Again, this is just one from the Vanity Planet vegan brush set. I done a sponsor post with them about, it must be 4 years ago at this stage, and I still love and use their brushes. They're absolutely fantastic. But I'm just using that angled brush to line right along that crease line to define there. To add an extra little bit of sparkle, I'm taking the Collection Glam Crystals Glitter Liner, and I'm wriggling this in the centre of the lid. And there's lots of different coloured kind of glittery particles in this, so I just think it's really nice. And then I'm going to be adding some lashes now in a second. So to prep the eyes for the lashes, I'm lining along the upper lash line again, just with the black shadow and the angled brush. And this is going to hide the band of the lashes, because I don't want to add any liquid liner to my upper lash line. So this just does the same. And then I'm also taking the black down along the lower lash line as well. I've added some of the Sosu lashes now. I can't remember which style. These were just a pair that I had floating around. And then I'm using the Mega Length Mascara from Wet n Wild, just to blend my own lashes in with the false ones, and also to add some definition down along the lower lash line as well. But then that's it. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and found it helpful. If there's an old palette that you want me to bust out and do a tutorial on again, let me know, and I'll catch you all very, very soon.